Hi, Leslie. I am so glad you are here. Um,
Likewise.
and for so many reasons that we're going to get into today. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Faisal Akintola, and I am the Welcome in Pittsburgh manager for the city of Pittsburgh. Right, I work for Mayor William Peduto, and Welcome in Pittsburgh, of course, is our immigrant and internationals integration strategy along with my colleague Allah, who's not here but works behind the scenes. Um, our goal is to introduce you guys to folks that you might already know, and some that you don't know, right? Because again, the region is becoming more and more global, and we have incredible people in this region that we want you to meet. So Leslie is not necessarily an immigrant, like you've probably seen in other recordings, but she's incredible because of the work that she's doing and has done and the lives that she's touched, right? And you guys are going to get a chance to hear a little bit about that. So I'm going to turn over to you, Leslie, to introduce yourself. It's funny, we were talking offline a little bit, but I was going to ask you, where are you from? Are you a native Pittsburgher, right? Introduce yourself to us.
Okay, so thank you so much for having me. And my name is Leslie Eizenman, and I'm the outgoing director of Refugee and Immigrant Services at Jewish Family and Community Services, or JFCS. And I was born in Boston, came to Pittsburgh when I was 1. So I'm almost a full-fledged native-born Pittsburgher at this point.
Nice. I'm thinking if you accepted it, what is the terminology? Is he a Bostoner? How do you call it? Like a Pittsburgher. What is Boston?
Bostonian. I'm proud of the Boston
Bostonian.
root, but I'm told I have a Pittsburgh accent, so I can't deny it.
You're a Pittsburgher.
Yeah.
Nice, nice. Boston's cool too. So I'm curious, you've been doing this for 13 years, right, Leslie? And I mean, I'm just excited to extract all the knowledge you've accumulated over this time. But first, I'm interested in knowing, how did you come about this work? Um,
So I've been at the agency almost 20 years, and my background is actually in writing, reporting, editing, and managing editor in journalism.
mm,
So before this, I worked for a literary journal for 8 years in its startup phase and learned how to write grants and interacted a lot. I did everything. I did around the printing, the publishing, the advertising, sales, everything, which I loved
mm,
and got to learn. Every day was different and I loved it. And then when I came to JFCS, I was their first grant writer. It was part-time. I was raising 3 kids and I worked in every department at JFCS. I really learned a lot about the agency, worked closely with management. I helped write grants for what was then a refugee department, and then there was a legal services department. I worked for all the different departments here. So you really get to know the agency. And when the longstanding director of the refugee, and she was also of the immigrant services, retired, I was asked if I would like to take that position. And without
mm.
hesitation, I said yes. I wasn't really sure what I was getting into, but I've always loved and travel international. I'm married to someone from Mexico, a refugee family that fled Eastern Europe that lives in Mexico. So I know it's the Jewish experience of being a refugee. So I was connected. I love languages. And I believe in the commitment to help people whose lives, um, have suffered and need a home. So it was a passion, and that's how I ended up with a very, very small department. At that time, we were taking maybe 40 people, and the wave of
Wow.
the Jews from the former Soviet Union had ended a few years before. So this was a lull,
Mm.
and I came on board at 2008 when we were making decisions as to what we wanted to do refugee wise, moving forward.
Tell me, what was it like 13 years ago? Like you said, I mean, you work to advocate for welcoming policies for city and county wide. Can you paint a picture for us? Like, what were some of the challenges you were going through then a little bit more? What was that? I mean, I moved to Pittsburgh 2014, right? So years later, right? Maybe a recipient of the work that you and others that have been doing in the region prior to me getting here. But I am curious, what was it
Well,
like
these are the
here
memories that stand out
during that
were
time?
the memories that stand out was a lot of people literally yelling at me. Why did you bring these people? You need to provide interpretation, and they have diseases. Um, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was a lot of different from the education system. We got it from the medical system, from public benefits, people, neighbors. Who were these people? Just that was shocked me. I would say people who I expected to be more caring and just really angry. And that was very hard because I thought I was entering a field, social work field, humanitarian assistance. And this was very difficult. And I got a lot of support from Linda Ehrenrich, who was my immediate supervisor, the agency. We're a member of HIAS, which is our national agency. And as I became more aware of rights and you know what do you need to get in the school, it's the same for these kids, and civil rights, title 6, as I became more aware, we had the law on our side, and it just sometimes providers didn't know, and we ended up over time getting a lot, having champions and getting those big systems to use interpretation. I mean, initially it was our interpreter. We were paying for our interpreter to be everywhere, which he couldn't be. It was a 20-year-old
Mm,
male who wasn't used to talking about all these intimate issues that families and women had at all these different providers.
mm,
So he would be on the phone and in person, and that was not a good situation at all for this. He was a refugee himself.
mm,
So it was very difficult to get that language in interpretation. So sometimes we had to use double interpretation, people who knew Burmese and Korean, and then the
mm,
person who knew Burmese and English.
mm,
But
mm,
and we started many programs, extra programs at night to help the parents understand life here. We did it in their community. I remember a case where I was attending one of these cultural orientation, and a mom's baby wasn't feeling well. So the decision was made to bring the baby to the ER. And I went. At that time, I'm shadowing. I wasn't the caseworker. And the doctors were asking, did you give the baby Tylenol? And the parents said, no. Well, they had given them other drugs. So just hearing how, if you say Tylenol, no, I didn't give Tylenol. But, to maybe my ears, Tylenol, yeah, I would have said, no, I gave them whatever it is. It wasn't aspirin, but
that's right.
just how
That's
the
right.
little differences in communication. And so even though you have an interpreter at that point, over the phone interpreter, these little things could affect the health.
That's
And
right.
yeah, so that's when I really learned that it wasn't just interpretation, it was the culture, that the cultural
Mm,
differences that also contribute to the successful interpretation and experience. And we had to learn that ourselves.
wow.
The things we said, simplify them, not use jargon, not use name brands. I mean, the child was ultimately fine, but all these things were happening at once. And then, a big change happened when the county Department of Human Services started an initiative, the Immigrants and Internationals Advisory Committee, and then getting more people involved. starting a language
mm,
access committee, starting a cultural competency committee, because we needed support. It couldn't just be us out there.
mm,
I mean,
mm,
resettlement agencies, one difference is our staff and many interns, AmeriCorps, they're attending appointments with clients. So we're eyewitnesses to some of this,
mm,
where immigrants coming on their own, they're having the same problems, but nobody's there to report it. So a lot of the work we did is helping anyone with a barrier to language and culture. And then it became more uh, requirements in the medical world to have interpretation services. And then we did ultimately, we started to get buy-in at the higher levels. And then it took a while, and it still takes time for it to trickle down to the front line. So I do think we have a lot of buy-in now from the higher management, maybe the middle management, but then you're dealing with the people clients or patients interact with, and they don't always know. So we're still reporting issues. Now there's diversity initiatives at the hospitals, and we know who to contact
mm.
and try to
That's right.
educate. Again, we're trying to educate, not um, being polite and respectful, and making sure our clients that get the service and not rescheduled and not, um, in an uncomfortable situation.
You said something, Leslie, earlier. I mean, you said a lot of things that we could unpack, but one that comes to mind is, when people get here, our refugee neighbors get here, people are angry, right? They're angry because of maybe misconceptions they might have about these families here, right? And I'm curious if you could think of one misconception, what would it be? And what would be your answer, right, to someone um, or neighbor who says, "Oh, like you said, oh, they have diseases." Like, what would be your response to someone if you had the opportunity to actually sit face to face and
Well,
talk to
a lot
those
of
folks that have misconceptions about refugees?
so in terms of myths that we try to refute when people come is that they don't want to integrate, that they don't want to work or learn the language, when that is not true. Refugees have been through tremendous trauma. Have proven persecution overseas. This is an opportunity that not many refugees in the world get. They've convinced and met many thresholds in order to get here, and they're getting a small amount relatively of a financial support at the beginning and our helping hand, and then they're going to have to make it. And it's amazing what they have to do in order to make it, but they get over this hump and they work and save money. Typically they're not spending money on what many of us spend money on, whether it's coffee shops or eating out. And so there is a little helping hand at the beginning, but it's minimal. And so it's not this money that's going to make them anything. They're still in poverty and they have to work. Someone in the family needs to go to work uh, by about 4 months in the United States. They need to make their rent. The kids are going to school and they're going to get English language assistance if they need it. They do qualify in terms of refugees for medical care and they have insurance, but they have to work it around their schedules like any other working parent. So, and I also like to say if you were in a refugee camp for 20 years and did not have the opportunity to receive formal education or build skills, they're coming still with resilience and strength and many skills in many languages. So it's not necessarily what we would see in a Western culture, and sometimes
Mm,
people in different cultures don't like to talk about what they've done. It's a more communal, less individualistic culture. So we have to pull out of them what they did. And maybe they were helping the community, but helping the women, helping children, teaching under a tree, even building, farming. Maybe they even wrote a grant or helping the nonprofit NGOs in the community. So people are being resourceful, and that is going to mean a great deal in the US. So luckily, I got to see that really challenging period that can last a while. It's not over in 6 months, let's say a year, and then starting to really see growth in many cases. And
Mm,
luckily, JFCS has many programs. We're able to work with families for as long as they want us to work with them in different ways.
mm.
It becomes more incumbent on them to ask for the help. And we've become a connector through some of our programs to existing resources, because the existing resources need to step up and help them when it's applicable.
You mentioned a lot about interns and volunteers, and I'm curious, for folks that might be listening, just like, oh, how can I help? How can I be a volunteer? How would you direct them to contact
So
JFCS?
we have many opportunities, and we're absolutely growing them, especially for volunteers. So we have AmeriCorps through Literacy Pittsburgh's Compass AmeriCorps program, where all their members work with immigrants or refugees. So they
Mm,
started that maybe, I don't know, 12 years ago, 10 years ago. We've had a Compass AmeriCorps ever since. We get, a full-time person for about 10, 11 months, and they're dedicated, and they especially help with medical and benefits. And because that's so time consuming, because we take our families to the doctor, advocate for them there, especially when it gets complicated, for many follow-ups. We also have interns from undergrad and grad.
mm,
So if they're interested, and we have opportunities with our new arrivals, we have opportunities with uh, different programs that they get into once they're here, with whether they want to help with employment. We have a program for intensive casework for those who need extra, because there's maybe a chronic illness involved or extreme challenges understanding life here. Special program. We have our Immigrant Services and Connections, which is a spinoff from the work we've done that's funded locally from the county DHS to help any immigrant, any refugee connect. We have interns helping with that. So we also have volunteers. They can help with our after school programs, which we've developed. We can match them with a new family. And we are going to build out something called community sponsorship. It's a kind of a trend that is going to take off in resettlement, where groups will support one family, both financially to a degree and hands-on for a period of time. It's been done in Canada. It's a very common model. And in the US, places have used it, and we're going to test it out too. Because with the increase in numbers due to President Biden's proposed increase in numbers, we just need more help. And it's very rewarding. Volunteers tend to really enjoy it. It takes a lot of education to understand what you're getting into when you see families living in, low income circumstances with very little material goods, understanding the trajectory and what our goal is and what success looks like. And once they understand, I think that could be a really mutually beneficial experience for new arrivals and volunteers here. So building more welcoming is going to be happening. I would say it. What was our reps? Info at um, refugee at JFCS Pittsburgh PGH.org. Let me say
okay.
that again. Refugee at JFCSPGH.org
Mm.
will get to the right people in terms of becoming involved.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leslie. And just two last questions for you. One, what is a memory um, that you would be living with? Like, what is something if you could share again, I'm sure you have so many others, and you've shared a couple. What is one memory of your experience that comes to mind?
Okay. It's so many,
I
but
know.
having someone who was in a wheelchair get the medical care they need and they can walk. I
Wow.
had a refugee say he wants to be a theoretical physicist. Like, wow. Um, I've seen the families getting the car and then the kid going to CCAC, to community college, and then on to four-year college, and then buying the house, and then starting a business. I the
Wow.
hope, the potential. I I have loved that. And even families
Wow.
that started just sometimes we have women, they just come from more traditional cultures and never did anything on them by themselves. And then they're
Mm,
taking their kids to the doctor, and then maybe they're creating art, and then they start selling it
mm,
or start cooking and start a catering business. Our bar for success is really just those little things that build up. Every week at our unit meeting, we start with good news. And it can be
mm,
so and so, got enrolled in school, or this person got
wow.
honors at school, or the
Wow.
mentor. I love seeing the mentors with our families developing the close relationships. So many
Mm,
positives. And that's what keeps you going. And they've been through so much that they will get through this. And our society is built on immigrants and refugees. This is the risk takers. These are the entrepreneurs. And
mm,
they're used to difficulties. And that's
mm,
how they get ahead. I have seen some of our staff, one of our former a refugee, and then he became our staff person, now's our monitor for one of our grants. We've hired
wow.
refugees. Uh, yeah, some are in med school.
Wow.
And so that's what I've loved, that I've stayed long enough to see that. And I'll continue to be involved, but letting our next director take over. And it's a great time, I think, for the transition.
See, the next question was, what is next for you, Leslie?
So I wanted to make sure my stewardship would continue. I gave, a lot of notice to the agency. They have had time to find the best person. I have time to train that person. I will continue to be available to because I think we're overlapping by 1 month, but there's so many details, so many moving parts that I'll stay available. I hope to do
Mm,
some volunteering. I hope to find, I thrive on the things I'm passionate about.
mm,
I am passionate about this and the arts and other things. I'll have to figure it out. My kids are living across the US, so I do want to spend more time visiting them, and we shall see. I don't need to have everything known.
that's
That's
right.
happened to me before. I reinvented myself before. I always do tell refugees that, I'm a lot older than you. I got my master's in my 50s. I took this job in my 40s.
Wow.
I will
Wow.
see. You don't have to stop at any particular age. So
Wow.
we'll see what lies ahead.
That's incredible. Leslie, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I hope everybody listens to your to this interview because again, you're such an inspiration. Thank you so much for giving us part of your time today, and then for those of you watching, I hope you understand what a gift we've had in the region, and we still have. Um, so again, please feel free to reach out if you want to volunteer. Again, thank you, Leslie, so much, and we wish you the
I've
best.
appreciated your amazing help welcoming Pittsburgh and the mayor's critical help. Been a great asset
Anytime, Leslie.
for us. So
Anytime.
thanks.
Thank you.